Last time on HMS Ark Royal, the Navy's flagship had a triumphant welcome on her return to Portsmouth. She'd led the largest international peacetime deployment for a decade, and it was a huge success. She engaged in battle training with navies from around the world and the elite American Harrier strike force.
Inbound, green 160.
Hey, Roger, sir, I understand you're on final now.
And over 5 months, Ark Royal proved her capability as the frontline aircraft carrier of the Royal Navy. In Canada, they welcomed Prime Minister David Cameron on board. In a speech to the crew, he talked about the defence review taking place in Westminster.
I know that whatever the outcome of this review, whatever the changes we will have to make, we should make them together and recognise that the Royal Navy is going to have a huge role to play in our future, in our defence and in our security.
That was then. 2 months on, it's a very different story. Ark Royal's been decommissioned.
It's a knife in the back, if you will.
It hurts. It does hurt.
Coming up, the final humiliation as all her ammunition is removed.
Once de-ammunition, we really do revert back to just being a ship rather than a warship.
Okay, for the last ever Harrier launch the jet.
And we are with the Ark throughout her historic farewell journey.
Thank you very much indeed for coming out. Many tears are being shed on board here at the moment.
I'm just delighted to have had the opportunity. I wouldn't have missed it for the world.
It's October 2010. HMS Ark Royal is in Portsmouth, with a new captain in charge of her, Jerry Kidd.
For me, Ark Royal's been very special. I was here 25 years ago as a midshipman. I know her very well. She has a very special place in my heart. Having spent so many years on board this ship, I'm just so delighted and honoured to be here as their captain.
Ark and her crew are at the top of their game, ready to be deployed. She can reach any trouble spot anywhere in the world within 5 days. But on October 19th, 2010, there's shocking news.
Good evening. Britain may be at war, but it didn't stop the government from announcing significant cuts to its armed forces today.
She is one of the Navy's iconic ships, and she was one of many casualties today of a defence review that at times just seemed like one giant cull. The Ark Royal will be decommissioned immediately, along with the entire Harrier fleet and much, much more.
Watch yourself.
The Prime Minister himself came on board and told us that we were all safe. So it's kind of a knife in the back, if you will.
We all feel that we've put so much work in. We've met every demand of us. That, you know, you do feel a bit of part of you's been ripped out when suddenly all that hard work is pushed to one side and say, well, we don't need you anymore, or yeah, you're finished, you're being paid off. It hurts. It does hurt.
As well as retiring Ark and the Harriers, there'll be 5,000 redundancies.
1 in 6 of us, we were told today, are going. It's mainly going to be people who served for over 20 years, like we get the chiefs, petty officers, but we're still unsure whether our jobs are safe or not, and nobody knows anything yet.
This will be Ark Royal's final voyage. It's a farewell tour, starting in Scotland, where she'll be stripped of all her munitions. From there, she'll embark aircraft for the last time and sail on to Newcastle to say goodbye to the city where she was launched. There'll be a final port visit to Hamburg before the Ark returns to Portsmouth and her engines are turned off forever.
5 cables to run to the wheel. Next leg, 133, steering at 132.
Very good.
But while Ark's still sailing, her flight deck can be put to use for training. So a Merlin's arrived from Culdrose Air Base to practice refuelling mid-air. Once in position, hovering and facing into the wind, the Merlin crew lowers the winch wire. The deck crew has to fight the downwash and attach the fuel hose to the wire. Then the guys in the helo have to connect the hose to the opening of the fuel tank. Once they've done it, the Merlin descends to reduce the pressure to pump fuel uphill. And all the while, the pilot has to match Ark's speed, 22 knots, and maintain a hover around 10 meters above the ship.
It's important for ourselves to keep practicing, but also for the deck crews, it's quite hard work for them. There's a lot of downwash, so it's important to keep practicing, to keep ourselves fully trained up and to keep them fully trained up.
They need to know how to do this. In a combat situation, the flight deck could be damaged, or the helicopter may need to refuel from a ship with no landing platform.
It will take quite a long time because obviously we're burning fuel as we take it on, but we can take on more fuel than we burn. So we'll sit there for 15-20 minutes and take on about 2 tons of fuel.
When they've finished, the Merlin heads straight back to Culdrose, because the crew has to prepare for the deammunition. And that means a clear flight deck and hangar, so they can start moving high explosives around the ship.
There are a lot of ammunition stored on board, laser-guided bombs, Maverick missiles, Sidewinders, so some pretty meaty weaponry. We don't want any accidents to happen, obviously, with that much ammunition. And of course, my worst nightmare is a fire on board.
Fire, fire, fire.
On Ark, the best way to deal with a nightmare scenario is to practice it.
We're going to send the ship to emergency stations because we want to send out a very clear message to the ship's company that despite what's happened over the last couple of weeks, HMS Ark Royal is still very much an operational warship. Yes, sir.
Damage Control Officer Whiskey Walker's retiring from the Navy, and the Auriga deployment should have been his last. But he stayed on Ark for this final voyage. And now, he's simulating a fire that will put the ship's crew in danger.
Down you go. I need a trigger to drive the ship to emergency stations, and the trigger will be 2 casualties that were down the space at the time and got burnt. So these are the 2 triggers to drive the ship to emergency stations. And as you can see, they've got burns, blisters. Right, HQ1, up the main... Right, scream!
At this moment, Whiskey's the most important person on the ship. He's responsible for fighting the fire.
Okay, fellas, well done, quick as you can.
For all the casualties and their treatment.
Just burns to his hands and face, so it's superficial burns.
Superficial. I'd hate to see major burns.
And he's got to make sure every sailor in the ship's company is accounted for.
Right, this is the emergency station for all spare personnel. They become spare personnel to augment my emergency party should I need them.
In a real crisis, emergency stations is a precursor to the call, abandon ship.
Okay.
Yeah, everybody's out down below now, so it's just a case of wait till the ship's at emergency station, then we'll go and do whatever.
Right, so we'll knock the exercise on the head, okay?
Okay, no worries.
This will be the last one we do for an exercise. If it happens again, it will be for real. So it's good that everybody now knows where they've got to go, what they've got to do, and how they need to react. And that's really, really important, because it is quite easy for the ship's company at present to get a little bit complacent. We can't afford complacency, because when we get complacent, that's when things start to go wrong.
Coming up, things do start to go wrong. Ark Royal's taking on water.
They're going to fly nicely like that.
It's over 3 weeks since Ark Royal's crew heard the news their ship's going to be decommissioned early. 10 years before new aircraft carriers will be ready to replace her. The Ark's on her way to Scotland, where all of her ammunition will be removed and taken to a secret military arsenal somewhere in the Scottish hills.
Once we de-ammunition, we really do revert back to just being a ship rather than a warship. And whilst externally we look the same, internally I know that we've lost our warfighting capability. So it really is taking the teeth out of the tiger's face in a way.
Down in the hangar, Ark's engineers are getting ready for the task ahead. The ship's full arsenal of missiles, torpedoes and bombs are being moved up here box by box from their magazines where they're stored below the waterline. The operation's led by Lieutenant Vicky Sherville.
I didn't expect to be de-ammunitioning the ship, so that in itself is a little bit of a surprise. Normally, a de-ammunition would be prepared over a series of months. Unfortunately, obviously, due to the timescales, that's been a bit accelerated. We've got about 3 days when we're alongside in Glenmallan on which to offload all of these items.
There are 40,000 kilos of ammo on board, including 25,000 kilos of high explosives.
Because we have such a large amount of explosive stores to offload, we're going to have to turn this hangar into a temporary magazine, which is actually a very large task.
Down on 6 deck, the ship's emergency teams are busy too, responding to reports of a flood. And it's not an exercise.
Get away with you.
Damage Control Officer Whiskey Walker heads straight to the scene.
It's coming back up to the sea. They're going to try and ice through that.
Seawater's pouring in. It's already spread to the corridor. And if they can't stop it, the female ratings mess will be next. If it's flooded with contaminated water, it'll be out of action for the rest of the voyage. And if they don't find the source of the leak, the flood will spread to the other compartments. They need to let HQ1 know what's happening.
What do you want me to tell HQ1?
Now just tell them it's about 12 inches in the bath.
HQ1 here. HQ1? Yeah, we've got 12 inches.
The team in HQ1 has to work out how serious the danger is.
Flood in 6 Gulf starboard junior head. There's approximately 12 inches of water in the compartment itself, with further 5 inches in the flat beyond. All personnel are reminded that the heads and bathrooms throughout the ship are out of bounds.
We need to work out whether it's gone into the cross passage. It has gone into the cross passage.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's all the way through the cross passage, yeah?
They find the problem quickly. One of the ship's waste disposal pipes wasn't properly secured. It is now. But there's still 30 centimeters of dirty water sloshing around, and it's threatening other areas of the ship.
What they're worried about at the minute is the amount of water in behind that door coming across to the dentists. So they need to heal over the starboard if we can.
They decide the best way to safeguard the surgery is to move the ship and list her over to one side.
Okay, well I can do it with Lima 2, but I can't do too much. If I don't do it, I risk the dentist surgery. Okay, so, you know, a small, slow circle will do me a lot of good here.
HQ1 wants the ship to turn 360 degrees in the water to give the crew a chance to bail the flood. The request is passed to the bridge for immediate action.
Starboard 20, steer 176.
Roger.
The plan works. With Ark listed to one side, the floodwaters washed away from the dentists.
Flood in 6 Gulf starboard junior head is now steady at 12 inches. Primary leak stopping has been effected. Clean-up operation is now in effect.
The good thing about sailors, in the face of adversity, they always come together. Despite the fact they're up to their ankles in shitty water, they're cracking on and having a laugh, because that's the spirit of the Ark.
The boots that have been contaminated are to be bagged up in ICW bags before being taken to 7 Hotel. End of the incident, end of incident.
The bridge crew's navigating Ark through the narrow straits of Loch Long to Glen Malin, a remote jetty where weapons can be handled safely.
313.5. 356.5.
Deammunitioning any ship is complex and potentially very dangerous, especially a ship this size with the amount of bombs and rockets and missiles that this ship carries to support air groups. So it's always a slightly tense time when we're deammunitioning. We're up here in Glen Malin, it's a long way from anywhere, it's nice and safe, it's controlled and it's quiet. For me, for the ship's company, it's quite a symbolic occasion. It's going to be quite a poignant moment. Stop both engines.
Coming up, the deammunition procedures threatened when the crew discovers 2 missiles that may have been tampered with. HMS Ark Royal is docked in Glen Malin, on the northwest coast of Scotland. It's 4 weeks since the government announced she was being withdrawn from service with immediate effect. Her crew's got a major removal job on their hands. 40,000 kilos of ammunition have to be crated up and taken off the ship, and over half of its high explosives. These are Maverick missiles, a sophisticated air-to-ground weapon delivered by the Harrier jets. Each of them weighs 300 kilograms and packs a mighty punch. But its strategic value is in its homing technology.
We've got a big camera up front. You can either do it like video, or you can follow a laser target.
The tails of it direct missile towards the actual target, and when it hits it, boom, it's done.
It's rare for even the weapons engineers to see a Maverick close up, because every missile's kept secure in a steel container. But before they're craned off the ship, each box is checked. And there's a problem. 2 containers haven't been sealed correctly and could have been tampered with. They need to be opened and checked, but it's not safe to do it on the flight deck. So it's back down to the hangar. They lower the fire curtain, just in case.
Lift up first, lift up, away from the weapon.
It's Petty Officer Mark Brown's job to inspect the weapon for any signs of damage or interference. The first thing is to check the arming lever is in the safe position.
Feel it, fore and aft, yeah, which is in the safe position there. Box is bonded to the weapon. Yep, okay. There's no rusty marks, there's no extrusions. Blinking plugs on.
The first missile passes inspection. Now, the second one. Under the red safety cap is the guidance section that locks onto a target. At the other end is the flight control system. If these components are damaged, the weapon's useless. This missile passes inspection too.
Happy now, yeah. And so all we're going to do was just make sure that the safety checks were carried out, make sure the weapon's not been interfered with. We've not actually found anything to be concerned about.
So now all 28 Mavericks are on their way. And next to go, more high explosives, the 1,000-pound paveway bombs. There's plenty of ammo still to move, but it's going to have to wait till tomorrow and daylight. On one deck, Captain Kidd's welcoming a special guest for dinner. He's Jock Moffat, a veteran swordfish pilot. Jock served on an earlier HMS Ark Royal during the Second World War.
There we are. Welcome aboard. Jerry to the captain. Thank you very much. Well, it's a great honour, sir.
In Navy terms, Jock's an A-list celebrity. In 1941, he was a key player in the sinking of the Bismarck, the German Navy's biggest battleship.
A great honour. Great honour. It's the man that fired the torpedo that knocked out Bismarck's rudders and allowed us to sink it. That's the man.
And there's newsreel from the time that documents the event.
Scouting planes left the Ark Royal to find the Bismarck, and swordfish torpedo bombers took off to fly in the face of terrific anti-aircraft fire. Air torpedoes reduced the speed of the Bismarck, enabling the British battleship to catch up on her flying start.
I was diving from 6,000 feet through a very thick cloud and had a 1,600-pound torpedo underneath. Managed to get on top of the waves and then turn in and do our attack.
Jock launched his torpedo at the perfect moment. It dealt a crippling blow to the Bismarck, jamming her rudder, which meant the German sailors under the command of Captain Ernst Lindemann couldn't steer her.
Eventually, the rest of the home fleet caught up and managed to sink her. But it was the Fleet Air Arm that stopped her.
Jock and the rest of 818 Naval Air Squadron returned to Ark Royal, and the sinking of the Bismarck was celebrated as a major naval victory of the Second World War.
A tender comes alongside with a very different cargo. They are the German sailors who were picked out of the water when the Bismarck went down. Probably you can't in honesty say that you're glad they were rescued. But the Navy picked them up because that is the Navy's tradition. We'll leave it at that.
That is where I became a man, was on Ark Royal. It's crazy. The Fleet Air Arm is synonymous with Ark Royal. And for the Navy to go to sea without the Fleet Air Arm and without the Ark Royal, to me, is unbelievable.
This will be Jock's final visit to a ship bearing the name Ark Royal.
I'll tell you about it on the way down, didn't I?
And for everyone, it's a mixture of celebration and sadness.
That came over you, is it? What's the number?
Next morning, the Ark awakes to a picturesque Scottish vista. In the hangar, Lieutenant Vicky Sherville's working out the most efficient way to offload the rest of the ammunition.
Questions or anything, let me know, I'll get you some more.
There's a lot of it. 136 paveway bombs for starters. It takes 3 days to empty all of Ark's magazines. The Tiger has lost her teeth for good. The next stop on Ark's farewell tour will be Newcastle, to pay a last visit to the city that built her. On the way, she's embarking 4 Harriers from one squadron of the RAF. The legendary jets are paying their final visit to the flagship before both she and they are retired.
Okay, confirm you're ready in all respects for fixing recovery.
4 pilots from one squadron, Royal Air Force, can now make their historic last ever Harrier sea landing. The vertical landing, using 22,000 pounds of thrust, is what made them the iconic British war machine. After today, it will never be seen again.
Recover 4 spot.
Very nice, yes, welcome aboard.
Deck Psycho, we're going for 4 spot and 6 spot for this recovery. July 3, recovered. Recover 6 spot. July 4, recovered.
That's the last time we'll see Harriers landing at sea in the Royal Navy ever. So it's a very poignant, special day today. It marks the end of an era, I think, for V-style aviation generally. And yeah, I think there's a lot of fairly emotional people on board today, but it's great to hear.
With Harriers back on board, Ark feels like a warship again. She's now ready to sail into Swan Hunter's dock in Tyneside, where she was built. She was launched by Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, in 1981.
I name this ship Ark Royal. May God protect her and all who sail in her.
As she left port for the first time 30 years ago, a controversial spending review was underway, as the newsreader of the day explained.
Ark Royal is Britain's most expensive warship ever, but with the government about to publish its latest defence review, this event was overshadowed by fears that the Ark could be mothballed even before her sea trials.
At the end of that review, the government chose to keep her. So now, she returns to Newcastle to pay a last tribute to her birthplace.
We've got a huge connection with Newcastle and the people of Newcastle as well. So it's always good to come up here on HMS Ark Royal.
Thousands of people lining all the streets and the jetties and the quaysides as we come in. Just don't realise just how much interest the Ark Royal generates.
Stop starboard. Stop starboard.
While she's in Newcastle, Ark will be open to visitors.
Whoa!
Wow. How's that? That cool? Yeah?
My dad worked on this when he was in Swan Hunter shipyards when it was first built. Just a pity it's all gone now. They'll probably regret getting rid of it.
I worked in one of the gear rooms and one of the engine rooms.
My mother's cousin was one of the people that got the job of building these ships for Swan Hunters. And it's a sad thing to say, but I'm glad he's not here to see it now, because I think he would be very upset. It's a shame that we're losing it. It's a great shame, you know. I just wish we could keep them.
Over 2 days, 10,000 people said goodbye to the Ark. And now, she set sail again. She's heading to Europe and her last foreign visit.
Stand 25, slow head 4.
As she travels across the North Sea, an historic event will take place. The Harrier jump jets and HMS Ark Royal will part ways forever.
The Harrier has been such an iconic aircraft. I mean, everyone knows it. It's world famous. It's the jump jet. It's British ingenuity at its absolute best. You know, to see it go out of service is a real shame. I think the country knows it's the end of an era.
Lots of crew members have come up to the flight deck to watch the Harriers leave.
First of 4, launch the jet. Okay, lights on. Okay, launch the jet.
In future, aircraft carriers won't have Ark Royal's ski ramp, designed specifically for Harrier takeoffs.
Okay, we're on DFC. Okay, launch the jet.
Instead, new jets will launch from a flat deck with a catapult system.
Okay, for the last ever Harrier launch, launch the jet.
It's the end of one of the greatest British military inventions, short takeoff and vertical landing aviation.
Second 4 airborne, fixing launch complete. Thanks very much, Ark Royal.
Yeah, mixed emotions, I have to say. It's a great shame, but we move on in life. And, you know, we're welcoming in the new aircraft going soon. So we'll look to the future now, building on the experience and the expertise and the history and the legacy of the Harrier force at sea.
The new Queen Elizabeth-class supercarrier won't enter service until around 2020. It's been designed for the more streamlined Royal Navy of the future. It'll displace 65,000 tons, 3 times more than Ark Royal, and be capable of operating over twice as many aircraft, but with a basic operational crew of around 600, a similar number to Ark. The replacement fixed-wing aircraft will be the F-35 Lightning II. With top speeds of nearly 2,000 kilometers per hour, it's twice as fast as the Harrier. It can carry double the payload for far greater distances, and it's almost impossible to detect on radar. Each jet will cost around £40 million, but they won't be ready to enter service for several years, leaving a gap in naval aviation.
I think probably one of the most important things now is all this experience we've got within this ship. As we move forward, we've now got to make sure that that experience gets taken forward, and we're ready in all respects when the new carriers come out. Nice, nice.
There's now a 6-hour journey up the River Elbe. Ark Royal sailing to the largest port in Germany, Hamburg, where her crew will have one final run ashore. Everyone's looking forward to shore leave.
He's got the fake tan on it. It's a big ferry port and international cruise ships coming here, so there can be girls from all over the world as well that we're hopefully going to meet.
And for Warrant Officer Whiskey Walker, the night's got real significance.
It's my last ever final on ashore in the Royal Navy. That's it, it's ended. So for me, it's really important. Like, it's quite a poignant time.
HMS Ark Royal! HMS
Ark Royal!
Coming up, the Ark makes her historic final entry into Portsmouth.
Thank you very much indeed for coming out. Many tears are being shed on board here at the moment.
HMS Ark Royal sailing through freezing December weather to the naval dockyard in Portsmouth. She's being officially decommissioned 3 years early, and her flagship status is being passed to HMS Albion. Captain Jerry Kidd started his naval career on the Ark, and 25 years on, he'll be leading her home.
To say goodbye to the ship, for me, will be an incredibly emotional moment. I can't tell you, unless you've served in the Navy, unless you've served on a ship, you don't really understand the attachment you get for the ship, actually, itself, and for the ship's company, because we work hard for months on end together. We trust each other with our lives, literally. So we have a very strong common bond, and that applies 24/7.
5 nautical miles outside Portsmouth, Ark's going to anchor for her last night at sea as the nation's flagship.
It's new grounds buoyed now, visual look. So Red 10 should pass that 2 cables to port, and that'll be 3 cables to run to the wheel over.
The plan now is to embark Lynx and Sea King helicopters and sail back into Portsmouth with a full flight deck. But the weather's against them. And all across Europe, airports are closing as runways get snowbound.
The flight deck's covered in snow, and unfortunately that's curtailed all the flying we had planned this morning. And as an aircraft carrier, we should have aircraft flying around the deck and landing and taking off. But yeah, conditions unfortunately have conspired against us today.
Ship's company to be aware that outside temperature is currently -2 degrees. Therefore, you are advised to wrap up warm.
By dusk, the landing spots have been cleared of snow and ice, and the Sea Kings are finally arriving. These helicopters are designed for naval operations. They're made from materials resistant to saltwater corrosion, and their folding rotor blades and tail mean they're easy to store on a warship. Like Ark, they're being withdrawn from service, but not until 2014, according to the Strategic Defence Spending Review. Next morning, the crew gets the ship ready for her big day. The Merlins and Sea Kings are being moved into their positions. But the Lynx helicopters still haven't arrived, and once again, it's down to the weather.
How's it looking today for flying? Well, why don't you just pan round and have a little look out there. Can you focus on fog? The fog has stopped any of the aircraft coming up from Culdrose. Sadly, no rotary wing activity for the morning to come to the ship. I think there'll only be the 4 aircraft that we've got on the deck now that will launch.
And the fog's causing problems on the bridge.
A captain's worst nightmare is entering harbour in thick pea soup fog, because we use Obviously, visual means, generally speaking, to get in and out of harbour. So when it's like this, as you can see, I can just about see the end of the ship. So we're going to have to go in under what we call blind pilotage conditions, which is where we navigate using radar and electronic charting. You know, when you're at war and operations, you can't let a bit of fog stop you.
As the anchor comes up, Ark's crew adopts Procedure Alpha for one last time.
Steer, 345.
Steer, 310. This is Ark Royal. Thank you very much indeed for coming out to welcome us for our final arrival. Particularly impressed with the very smart banner farewell to the mighty Ark, and thank you. There are many tears that are being shed on board here at the moment.
To take her into Portsmouth and turn the engines off forever, of course, it's quite emotional for me. But to command Ark Royal is really very special. So I'm just delighted I've had the opportunity. I wouldn't have missed it for the world.
Now they're alongside, it's time for the aircraft to leave their carrier for good.
Right, about to shut down the engines for the last time. Port shaft, ready?
Shut down the port inner.
Shut down the port inner. Port inner is deselected. I have the trip, ready to shut down the port inner. Carry on. Control supplies are latched. Actually, ceiling cage shut. Control shut.
Good afternoon, Ark Royal's captain speaking.
Okay, launch the jet.
Hands to action stations, hands to action stations. This is the best job in the world.
You wouldn't wish a better ship than Ark Royal.